All right, me. It is the 27th, and today while substitute teaching, I finished reading Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Um, this is the first Neil Gaiman thing that I've ever read, and so I was not quite prepared. Partially because, right, if memory serves me correctly, Neil Gaiman is also the author for Coraline. But as a whole, I believe Neil Gaiman tends to write a lot of, I don't know if mythology is the right word, but it's the word I'm gonna use. Writes a lot of mythology type pieces, or pagan mythology, I guess. That, or legends, whatever word, and just kind of jumps right into it. And this is no different. This centers around fairies and the fae and kind of what that looks like, and like the fabric of reality and what that actually looks like and things. And in that sense is a very, very interesting piece of an attempt to place the fae and fairies into a modern setting, right? And so that is very interesting in a lot of ways. But certainly it's very disorienting, in which you just kind of get thrown into it without a lot of background. It just kind of happens, which is fine, right? And you just kind of have to center yourself, and certainly helps that I have kind of a basic understanding of these things, right? I would assume someone who is not prepared to have that sort of, or has that sort of background knowledge, would be completely lost, right? But that's that. Yeah, there is a great deal on these concepts of memories, right? And these concepts of how do we view things as a child versus how do we view things as an adult, right? Part of the whole thing is that our narrator, it comes back to this house, which is at the end of the lane, and he is coming there immediately after a funeral. And it's he thinks that it is his first time back since he was a very young boy. And as he is sitting there, he has these memories that begin occurring of this incident that occurred when he was 7 years old, which is the vast majority of the book. In fact, it is the prologue and the epilogue that are the old man or the middle-aged man, and then all the actual chapters are of the 7-year-old boy and his memories. And then we kind of go through it, right? And it is a lot of focus on the fact that he's 7 years old and he's working with someone who at least presents as 11, but the fears that they have, and how, even though they're not necessarily able to articulate why something is wrong, that they are able to feel it instantly, that something, by looking at something, that something is not right, something is wrong here, which is kind of one of these things that comes up a lot within mythology, or within just a lot of different pieces of work that have this sort of magical thing to them, in which the children are, or it presents as something that children have a lot more affliction towards, I guess. or they'll have a lot more easier time connecting to, versus the fact that as adults, it becomes this thing of, as is explained in the book, of like staying on the path, right? That as children, it is usual and expected that children are going to, when walking somewhere, they're going to explore while walking, or they're going to move off the path and they're going to find their own paths and things, versus when we get to adults, it is very much that adults just stick to the path, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it just is, right? And so you have that whole conversation going on. This also comes up at a couple different points at the prologue and epilogue, in which it turns out that this is not his first time coming back to the house. He has come back to the house at basically every single major event in his life that he's had to return or be around this area of Sussex, and he just doesn't remember. And maybe it is the fact that he doesn't want to remember. Maybe it is the fact that the caretakers and the family do not want him to remember coming back so much. But that's that. Yeah, it is. There's certainly a lot of like coming of age stuff, right? You get this whole concept right at the very end of a young boy in our narrator that is looking at a situation in the world in which like it is starting to be destroyed, and he has the last remnants of this thing that this other group wants, and in order to an attempt to protect and save himself, or protect and save the world, he's willing to sacrifice himself at 7 years old, and runs out of the protection circle and runs out of being protected, to sacrifice himself. And what he remembers is then the girl that he's working with. I just can't remember their names. I'm so bad with names, unfortunately. But the girl that he's working with ends up covering him to protect him, which then means that she is the one that gets devoured in some way. And so you have some layers to that, right? You have this idea of, I guess, number one, how young are you allowed to be to make decisions that affect your life, right? Would it be fair for a 7-year-old to offer themselves up to save the world? Is that fair? But you also have this thing of because part of the plot point becomes that the 11-year-old is actually a part of a much larger structure of she has been there for forever in some ways, that she is part of this mythology world. And so you get this question of, in order to protect people, right, is it worth it to give yourself up fully? Or if you know that you will eventually come back or eventually be able to, how much are you willing to suffer? So you have this comparison of where you have what could possibly be the killing of the 7-year-old boy, or the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that it would take for this 11-year-old girl to then come back as she was. So you have a little interesting dichotomy there. You also have this thing with the actual hag or fae, in which she comes through the portal and comes to the door, and she comes to the door because, or I guess, it's never really explained, which is fine, right? But the whole concept becomes is that she's trying to make this world more comfortable for her to live in, instead of being in the other world. And she's allowed to come through the door because of this man taking his own life, in which he racked up so many debts through gambling, and this intense want and desire for money of first gambling his own life, or gambling his own life savings, and then gambling a company's savings, and then gambling other people's life savings, and flushing it all down, and this intense want and desire then allows her to come forth into the world. And then she's trying to make this world more beneficial for her, positive for her to live in. And so it is, how can we solve all these issues, and how can we give everyone what they want? And it's very monkey paw-esque, or Faustian, or whatever you want to refer to it as, of like that you are going to give people what they want in the worst possible ways, right? And so you have our narrator and his sister who do want money because they're children, and the way they end up getting that is our narrator starts choking on money in his sleep, and the sister gets money pelted at her when she's trying to be with her friends. The dad wants in some way to feel in control, or loved, or respected, or something of that sort. And so our hag poses as this new caretaker for the family, and then begins this affair, and would presumably continue to have this affair with the husband, right? And that sort of thing, right? And it becomes this kind of cautionary thing of, yes, we may wish for things, we may want for things, but what we actually want is a much larger goal, or we are looking for things, but then they also have to be done in specific ways, right? And so that's that. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. It's an enjoyable read. It's certainly very fun in a lot of ways. It is certainly jarring to enter into the world of magical realism without any true basis. You just kind of jump into it and go from there. But I don't know, reading stories that involve the Fae and fairies that is more grounded in, Grimm Brothers fairy tales type, rather than, pleasant world, is certainly a lot more fun. But that's it. That's The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman.